Hello everyone, and welcome back to Scary Interesting and to another collection of horrible fates. The final story in today's video is about an incredibly gruesome event, and despite plenty of written records about what happened, it still remains a mystery to this day. And although the events in this video are fleeting and non-descriptive, they are still highly disturbing, so viewer discretion is strongly advised. As I've mentioned on the channel before, a ton of research, writing, and work goes into creating videos, and I've previously shown what a powerful tool Opera is in helping with all of that. Well, Opera is back with an incredible update to their already awesome browser. Like for example, with their new update, their music player can now be detached to become a floating player for wherever you find it to be most convenient. Next, if you're the type of person who likes to customize every aspect of your experience, Opera's new themes feature gives you full control over the animated background, the interface color, the intensity, and even the sounds the browser makes, like the ones you're hearing now. There's also their intuitive split screen, which is a must if you're jumping back and forth between two pages. Just drag the tab down and you can work on two things at once in the same window. And then if you're using more than two tabs, their Tab Island feature is essential. First, it automatically groups all the links you click on a web page that opens other windows, like Airbnb for example. Or if you want to sort your tabs by a certain theme or topic, you can create your own tab islands and then just expand or collapse them whenever you want. The Tab Traces feature also marks your most recently visited tabs with an underline. The darker the line, the more recent it is, helping you easily identify and go back to pages you need without clicking around a bunch. And finally, their integrated AI Aria can now be opened in the command line using Control// or Command/ if you're on a Mac, and this is all on the same page you're using, so you don't have to leave the page at all. They've also added both an image generation and image recognition feature. Like for example, it was able to correctly identify what mountain this is, which for the videos on the channel is quite useful. And although we use AI images sparingly, something that is extremely useful is generating a silhouette like this to then compose an entire scene in Photoshop. So, if you want to try out all these incredible features and streamline your workflow, I highly recommend you check out Opera for free using the link in the description below. And a huge thank you to Opera for sponsoring this video. Located 10 kilometers west of Silkeborg, Denmark, the Bjeld Bog is a wide open expanse of soggy, waterlogged ground that literally moves like a waterbed when stepped on. There are only a few trees dotting the area, and often a thick fog looms over parts of it. The bog is also desolate and hauntingly quiet. One look at it and you might assume that it would be a great place to hide a body, and the thing is, you'd be right. On the morning of May 6, 1950, two brothers and their mother were visiting the bog to dig up peat, which can be used as fuel for heating. While the two boys were shoveling in a fairly deep hole, their mother noticed something odd. She stopped the boys and pointed out something in the mucky ground, almost like some kind of protrusion. The boys didn't see anything and basically brushed their mother off, so she rolled up her sleeves, jumped into the hole, and started digging with her bare hands. It wasn't long before she felt exactly what it was that she spotted from the surface, and she didn't even need to see it to know what it was. With her hands beneath the muck, she could feel the unmistakable shape of a human head. It would be another 2 days before police were alerted to the find, and local authorities were actually working on a missing persons case of a young schoolboy and assumed that the boy's body had been found in the bog. This would quickly change though after arriving at the scene and seeing that the body was at the bottom of a hole more than 6 feet or 2 meters deep. The family told police that there were no signs at all that anyone else had been digging in the area when they arrived, which ruled out the possibility that the body was that of the missing boy. For a body to be that far buried, it had to be old. The local museum was then notified of the find, and several personnel arrived at the scene to examine the body. What they would end up seeing when they got there made it completely understandable why someone might think the body belonged to someone who had died more recently. The body was lying on its side in the fetal position, and the features on the face were still of such high quality that it expressed a sense of serenity and peace. The eyes and mouth were also closed, and in any other set of circumstances, you might assume the man was just sleeping. His head was covered in a leather cap with a chin strap, and what little hair they could see was red, indicating he had been there long enough for the substance in the water to die. What was impossible to ignore, however, was the rope made of animal leather that was still tied tightly around his neck. Experts from the museum knew pretty early on that this was a significant historical find, and soon after, the arduous task of recovering the body without disturbing it began. The two sons, museum personnel, and even some police officers began the very careful process of further excavating the body, which was dubbed the Tollund Man, named for the nearby village of Tollund. It was then taken to a hospital in Copenhagen so a forensics examiner could perform an autopsy. And while the age of the body was not yet known, it was clear that the Tollund Man's life took place long ago. After the mud and peat had been cleared away, the forensic examiner was stunned by just how well the body was preserved. The right side of the body, which was the side the man was laying on, showed very little sign of decomposition. Over time, it appeared as though the body itself had shrunk, and there was some damage to the Tollund Man's arms and hands because of the digging, but all in all, the body was in shockingly good shape. The forensics examiner credited this to the bog itself. A bog environment contains very few minerals and even less oxygen. They also contain a lot of a particular acid. All of these factors come together to create an environment that's mostly devoid of bacteria that cause decomposition. The acid will, however, draw out calcium from the bones, which causes them to degrade and gives the body an almost jelly-like feel and appearance. Now, on initial examination, one of the first things the forensics examiner wanted to determine was the cause of death. Obviously, the noose that was tied around the man's neck was a pretty good indication, and subsequent examinations of the body would confirm that his tongue was also found to be distended, which is a hallmark of a death like his. So after that, the question then became why? To answer that question, it was important to peg down the age of the man, and not necessarily how old he was when he died, which is estimated to be between the ages of 30 and 40, but when he lived. This was left to carbon dating, and when the results of the test were in, they were astonishing. The Tollund Man was somewhere between 2200 and 2400 years old, meaning he lived during the early part of the Iron Age, well before the Romans conquered much of northern Europe. This means estimates of his birth year are between 405 and 380 BCE. During this time period, this area of Denmark was densely populated with farms surrounded by houses and villages. And while not much is known about the people of this time because they had no written language, evidence suggests that they performed religious rituals, likely as an offering to influence the god or gods they believed provided bountiful growth periods and harvests, and these rites likely included human sacrifice. And although he's the best preserved and most well known, the Tollund Man is hardly the first or only prehistoric body found in bogs of northern Europe. While these bog bodies, as they've been called, have been discovered all over places like Germany, England, Ireland, and the Netherlands, Denmark has actually uncovered more than 500 of them with skeletal remains dating back to the Iron Age or beyond. And one thing many of these recovered bodies have in common is that their end was violent and intentional. Some have been found to have been stabbed, bashed in the head, and of course, others similar to the Tollund Man. And the reason so many of these people have been found is that modern-day researchers believe that these bogs were viewed by the people of the period as supernatural sites. Because many places like Denmark at the time were covered in thick, dense forests, bogs were a bit of an anomaly because they were mostly treeless, leaving nothing but clouds between the ground and the blue sky above, almost giving people direct access to the heavens. In addition, there appears to have been great care taken in burying the Tollund Man, despite the noose around his neck. Forensics determined that his eyes and mouth had been closed for him after death, and his lying position as if sleeping suggested that he was intended to be laid to rest in a peaceful manner, which would be consistent with how human sacrifice was handled at the time. So, in the end, experts seem to be in agreement that the Tollund Man, for whatever reason, was chosen and killed as sacrifice. In the nearly 75 years since the body was recovered, it's continued to undergo extensive testing, and today, the well-preserved head of the Tollund Man is on display at the Silkeborg Museum.